speaker today is Dr. Paul Sutter. Paul is many things. First of all, he's a cousin to me and my wife Jane, of which we're very appreciative because he raises the IQ of the whole family. Secondly, he's a cosmologist. Now, I didn't know what a cosmologist was until I started talking to Paul, and he explained it to me. Most importantly, he's an astrophysicist. A PhD astrophysicist. He got his PhD in physics from the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana. And he spent 3 years at the Paris Institute of Astrophysics after that. And then he now splits his time between a fellowship sponsored by the Italian Department of Energy in Trieste, Italy. And he's a visiting scholar at the Ohio State University Center for Cosmology. He has his own podcast, which you can get on YouTube and see all answers to questions that you might have. He is a participant in the new series Real Space, where he interviews fellow young physicists about their lives, interests, and passions in order to break down the misconception about scientists, whatever that might be. Okay. He's frequently quoted in science articles, has regular appearances on Good Day Columbus, and is currently writing a book about space. He describes himself as a spaceman, and I think he is one. So with that, let's give a warm Rotary welcome to Dr. Paul Sutter.
Thank you very much, Ron, for the very flattering introduction that I wrote. But it's nice of you to actually read the whole thing out loud. I wasn't expecting that. That was very nice. I'm going to start with some easy questions, and we'll get to the hard questions later on, okay? So the first easy question is this. Has anyone in the room, by a show of hands, heard of a thing called YouTube? YouTube. All right, good. We're off to a good start. What about Facebook? Facebook, okay, not as many hands. That's okay. Don't be embarrassed. Don't be embarrassed if you don't know. Okay, Twitter. Twitter. Okay, good. All right, now it's going to get a little challenging. What about Snapchat? Okay, Instagram. Okay, wow. Okay, Yik Yak. Yeah, that clears the room. That's a thing. Yik Yak is a thing. Look it up. What about a podcast? All right, good. Wow, okay, that's great. So for those of you who didn't raise your hand about a podcast, and those of you who raised your hand because you were embarrassed and you want to pretend you know, a podcast is a radio show that you download. You go on iTunes, you can pull it onto your phone or your computer, and you can listen to it whenever you want. The reason I'm bringing these up, these kind of social media, these kind of new media venues, is because this is where audiences are. This is where people consume media. This is where they get their news and then their information and their entertainment and also their education. And it's surprisingly popular with young people. This is where they are. They don't watch evening news. They don't open up the Wall Street Journal. They pull out their phones and they read about it on their phones. This is how they get information. As an example of how popular this stuff is, there's a lady on YouTube who has a show where all she does is open up boxes of toys. That's all she does. You never see her. She provides commentary and voiceover, but you see her. She shows off the packaging. She opens it up. She talks about all the accessories. That's all she does. Last year, she made around $4 million from advertising on YouTube. She has tens of millions of subscribers. All right, and I know this lady exists because I've seen her show, and you know what? It's actually really compelling. It's freaky how absorbing and hypnotic her show is. You get sucked into her world, and you get fascinated by the little toys. It's amazing. But tens of millions of subscribers watching her show every single week to open up boxes of toys. These are ratings, these are audiences that networks would kill for. It's amazing. And so this is where the audience is. This is where people are. This is how people consume media. So the challenge as a scientist who is interested in outreach, who wants to reach out to the community, to tell them what we know, to educate, we can't go through traditional media anymore. It doesn't reach ears and eyeballs anymore. We have to go to where the people are. And that's challenging. It's tough. But it's part of a larger issue. Why should we even bother? Why should we even bother doing outreach in the first place? And so this, I actually want to ask you. I want your perspective. Why do you think scientists should bother talking to the public? Go for it.
The anti-intellectual movement within America right now.
The anti-intellectual movement that has been around forever, by the way, if you've read any history of science. Very good point. Any other reasons why scientists should bother?
To continue the recruitment of more people.
Yeah, to spark imagination in the youths of today so that they embark in careers, not just in sciences, but also technology and engineering and mathematics. What are some other reasons?
To learn more what the real truth is.
Just to learn. You know, it's fun, it's entertainment, it's educational. Some people are just curious about the universe, but they don't have a job where they get to explore the universe, but they still like to know. I've got a hand up in the back.
We're so used to saying this isn't rocket science and you are going to prove us wrong.
Yeah, those are all excellent reasons. And I agree 100% with all of them. One of the reasons that drives me in outreach, one of the reasons why I do it, is I feel that it's almost a moral or ethical duty to do this. Research around the world is almost exclusively publicly funded. Some of it is privately funded, but you paid for this. All our scientific achievements and our knowledge, you paid for, you invested in it with some tiny sliver of your tax dollars. This is your research. We owe it to you as scientists to tell you what we learned. It's morally incumbent upon us to tell you. Even if you don't like the answers, even if you don't really care, we at least have to present the information in a way that you can understand it because it's your money, your investment. I don't know about you, but when I buy something or when I invest in something, I like to know what I got. And I want to make sure I want to know what I'm paying for. And it's the same way with science. We owe it to you. We owe it to the taxpayer. We owe it to the community. But if it's so important, if there's all these amazing reasons why we should do outreach, why don't we? And again, I want your opinion, not just because I didn't practice my talk, it's because I really want to know your perspective. So why do you think scientists don't engage in outreach?
I think it's too complicated for us to grasp.
Yeah, elitism, ivory towerism, yeah, that attitude exists a lot. Any other reasons?
Just don't want to hear the contra point of view.
Yep, you don't want to argue with people who don't understand the full nuances and subtleties in your research. You devote your life to studying some problem, and then some dude on the street starts arguing with you. You don't want to bother with that.
They don't want to pass up the discovery that they've made until they can.
They want to monopolize it. They want that Nobel Prize. Yeah.
Or the patent
or any technological innovation. My research does not lead to technological innovation, so I don't have to worry about that. But there is plenty in physics that does lead down those roads. Yeah. Any other reasons why a scientist?
They don't want to spend the time what they consider a secondary effort.
Bingo. That is the number one reason. There is no incentive for a scientist to engage in outreach. Now, universities, departments, funding agencies will give lip service to outreach. They say, oh, education and outreach is very important for all the reasons we just talked about. But when it comes to hiring decisions, when it comes to promotion or tenure committees, outreach doesn't matter. What matters is grants and publishing papers, because that's what brings in the money. And a little bit of teaching, because technically at universities we're supposed to teach people. But that's actually a minor role. A university professor spends around 10% of their time teaching. Most of it is writing grant proposals, because that's how they get paid. That's what funds the departments. So there's no incentives for a scientist to actually try to do outreach. There's no reason for them to do it. And it's hard because for all the reasons we've talked about. It's hard, and there's no incentives, and because there's no incentives, there's no money in it. There's no personal reward. There's no career reward for a scientist to do outreach. And there's no monetary reward. If you have some outreach idea, outreach costs money. If you want to do, say, a set of YouTube videos with decent production values, that's around $50,000 to get you started. If you want to have a set of telescopes so you can bus inner city kids out into a field so they can see the stars for the first time, that's 10 grand to run that program over the course of a couple years. That's real money, right? That's not pocket change. In departments, in universities, now OSU is a rather good exception. They have very strong outreach efforts, but for the most part, there isn't budgets for it. They can't support kind of outreach activities to connect with the community to solve these kind of problems of scientists being disconnected from the general public. But scientists, being the creative people that they are, and the industrious, hardworking, intelligent people that they are, have come up with ways to fund outreach, to get the money so that they can go out and connect with the community. One particular model is the crowdfunding model, where if I have some project idea that, say, costs $10,000, I don't have $10,000. You might or might not have $10,000, but you certainly don't have $10,000 for an outreach project. But you've got $10 or $20. You put a couple dollars on the table because you joined the grandfather club. We can all contribute a little bit of money and build a program. And people who contribute money get a little incentive, get a little perk for being a contributing member, but they're able to pay for some larger project that wouldn't normally get funded from a traditional funding agency or a traditional budget in a department or a university. And one example of this is Fiat Physica, that's Latin for Make Physics Happen, and I'm part of this community. They fund a lot of wonderful projects, like helping kids in Africa get a start on STEM education using astronomy, or maybe funding some out-of-the-box thinking in physics research that wouldn't normally get funded, or helping some guy do his podcast. Now, I'm not asking you for money. That would be pretty gauche of me, at least today. Someday I will ask you for money, but not today. I just want you to be aware that there are some programs being developed that you're going to see more and more of that leverage new media, that leverage social media, so that scientists can become more connected with the general public, so that they'll connect with them on Twitter. They'll post about their research. They'll talk, they'll engage with people to try to educate or inform or have discussion about their research. And there is demand there. There's a market there. People are curious about physics research. They are curious about astrophysics research. They're curious about space. People see a newspaper article or catch a program on TV or see something a friend posted on Facebook, and they want to learn more, and they want to go to an authoritative source. They want to talk to someone who at least maybe has some idea of what they're talking about and isn't just making things up. And that's where I come in with my podcast, my downloadable radio show, and it's also on YouTube. Because people ask me questions all the time. As soon as they find out I'm an astrophysicist, they're curious. They remember something they heard last week or last month or last year, and they want to know more. So people will sit next to me on airplanes, and they peek over my shoulder, and you know, we've all done this. We've all seen what other people are working on their laptops. And they see I'm writing a paper or doing some analysis or making some plot, and they say, oh, what do you do? You know, there's some interesting words on your laptop screen that I don't normally see. And we start talking about astrophysics. Or I go to COSI, and I do a program, and then after it, I'm mobbed with kids and adults, and they all have questions. So I started this podcast 6 months ago so that people can ask questions on social media, and I can answer them. And podcast is like the perfect venue for this, because With traditional TV or traditional radio, you have production deadlines. You have to get the stuff out the door. You don't have time to allow people to ask questions and then answer them whenever you want. And you're stuck to certain length segments. You're stuck to having to answer this question in 5 minutes or less. But a podcast, I can go as long as I want. And it's incredibly cheap to run a podcast. Not zero, which is why I have a crowdfunding campaign. It does cost some amount of money, but I don't need advertisers. I don't need to pay for a giant radio tower to blast my signal across the city. I just upload it onto a server, and anyone in the world can be a part of the audience. So with that in mind, now it's time for you to ask questions to me. So here are some questions that I've gotten in the past, and I've answered on my show, and I even have slides. So you can ask one of these questions if you want, or any kind of question you want about space. It really can be about anything. I'll give you relationship advice if you want. I'm not necessarily an expert at it, but I'll answer the question, sure. But try to keep it about space or about outreach or the kind of challenges that scientists face when communicating with the public. So a long question and answer session.
So have there been any big significant discoveries or revelations in the last year or so that have changed the way we look at certain aspects of astrophysics or the cosmos?
Yeah, excellent question. So I would say the last big revolution, the thing that really changed the paradigm of the fundamental picture of the way we looked at the universe was actually around 20 years ago. In the late 1990s, we discovered that our universe is expanding. We've known the universe has been expanding, which means every galaxy is getting farther away from every other galaxy. We've known that for like 100 years. Edwin Hubble discovered it. But in the late 1990s, we discovered that this expansion is accelerating, which means not only are galaxies getting farther and farther away from each other, every single day they're getting faster and faster and faster as they get farther away from each other. An accelerated expansion of the universe. We have no idea what this is. We give a cool name to it. We call it dark energy because if you don't know what it is, you might as well give it a cool name. And the last 20 years, a large focus of the cosmological community, the scientists who study the large-scale structure and evolution of the universe, have been focused on trying to measure it more precisely so we can try to figure out what it is. But we really have some only vague ideas. Since then, it's been more, I would say, fine-tuning, more precision measurements of things we've already discovered, because we're in this regime in science where we have the big picture painted in broad brushstrokes. But our models and our theories require more precise measurements. So we can actually select one model or one theory over the other. And so now it's actually been more of an engineering challenge to build more precise instruments, to do more sophisticated statistical analysis on that data so we can tease out more precise measurements so we can actually try to figure it out. And we're going to be in that stage for another 10 or 20 years probably.
Are you looking forward to learning anything specific from the New Horizons probe flying by Pluto this summer?
Yeah, so New Horizons is headed towards Pluto. It's a NASA mission. It's been on the road for 9 years, by the way. It takes a long time to get anywhere in space. Space is really, really big. Pluto, so I'm actually not a planetary scientist. This is how diverse the field is, that even an astrophysicist can specialize in certain subfields of astrophysics. So actually, I personally don't even know a lot about planets. I go bigger than that. The solar system's too small for my own personal research. What I am excited about with New Horizons is as it flies by Pluto, it's going to take the most precise measurements, the most accurate measurements, the most close-up measurements. We're going to learn about a whole new class of objects in our solar system. So for a long time, I'm sure we all grew up, our solar system was a bunch of planets and a bunch of asteroids. But now, recently, we've learned relatively recently, we've learned that there's a whole bunch of stuff on the outskirts of the solar system, leftover debris from when the solar system first formed 4 billion years ago. And we actually don't know a lot about these objects, these debris, this leftover stuff. And by studying objects like Pluto and its environments, we can learn about the processes that formed our solar system. We can learn about the evolution. We can learn about what it's made of. We can learn about what kind of molecules were present in the earliest moments of the solar system, which leads to questions like, how common is life in our galaxy? Because everything you're made of came from the formation of the solar system. It was processed during that epoch. And we want to know, well, how common are amino acids? How common are the basic building blocks of life? Can they only be processed on a planet with liquid water, or does it come from some other process in the formation of a solar system? And by studying planets and rocks and gunk and leftover stuff in the outskirts of the solar system, this gives us a window into the earliest moments of the solar system. So that'll be very exciting for me. Over there.
What educator first inspired you to become a professional spaceman?
Yeah, great question. So I grew up, when I was in grade school, I was obsessed with two things. I was obsessed with space and dinosaurs. I never thought any of that could be a career. It was just something for fun, pretty pictures, or little model dinosaurs that I would play with and they would eat each other. When I went to high school and into college, I actually went into computer science, and I started as a computer science major. And one day I took a class. I just signed up for an astronomy class because it fulfilled some requirement. I've always had this interest in astronomy. And my professor was Dr. John Poling. This was at California Polytechnic State University in San Luis Obispo, California. And after the very first lecture, I was hooked. Like, I was just blown away. It was stuff I had known since a kid, but with meat behind it, with math, with analytics, with science behind it. And then it clicked. I thought, I could do this as a job. It's not just a hobby. This can actually be a profession. And that week I switched to physics, and I haven't looked back.
Is black holes the reverse of expansion of galaxy?
All right, very interesting question. So we got a couple things going on. I'll repeat the question, don't worry. Are black holes the reverse of the expansion of the universe? Short answer is no. But I can see where you're going with this. So the expansion of the universe means at the very largest scales, outside of our solar system, outside of our galaxy, the very largest scales in the universe, the whole universe is expanding. All right. A black hole is a remnant, a leftover of a dead star. A really massive star where the gravity has crushed the star so much into such a tiny little volume that nothing can escape. So you stand here on Earth, and if we want to get off the Earth, we need to build a big rocket ship, right? If we want to get into orbit. If you can imagine if we lived on, say, an asteroid or a small planet or the moon, you see astronauts jumping on the moon, and they can just jump, and they jump a few feet, right? Because there's not as much stuff. It's easier to get off the surface. So a black hole has so much stuff concentrated in such a small volume that you can't jump off it. Not even light can jump off it. And that's why they're black. They literally suck in light. If you or a beam of light enters a black hole, you never get out. You're stuck. Black holes are very, very small. The biggest ones are about the size of our solar system. They live in the centers of galaxies, but they're unrelated to the large-scale expansion of the universe. They've pinched themselves off. In the back.
Did God create the Big Bang?
Did God create the Big Bang? Okay. I said any question. You know what? I opened myself up to it. That's fine. I'm going to tell you what the Big Bang Theory is. It's an Emmy Award-winning television program on CBS. Now, I believe it had producers. I don't see God in the credits, so. Okay, the Big Bang Theory, the scientific theory. I'll tell you what it is not. The Big Bang Theory is not a theory of the creation of the universe. I'll say it again to really let it sink in. The Big Bang Theory is not a theory of the creation of the universe. It's a theory of the history of the universe, in the earliest moments of the universe. A larger question of where the universe came from. Not my department, all right? Theology department is down the campus. Philosophy is in another direction. Science concerns itself with things that can be observed and that can be quantified. So that when we observe our universe, we see this expansion of the universe, and we're driven to the logical conclusion that a long time ago the universe was smaller. And around 13 billion years ago, our entire universe was about the size of a peach and at a temperature of over 1 million degrees. You say that's crazy talk, and the people who first thought of that idea were labeled as crazy in scientific circles, but they made predictions about what the structure of the universe ought to be. They made predictions about what we ought to observe, and those predictions match observations. And that's as far as we can go. We can bring our physical theories and our understanding to a certain point, in which case our mathematics break down. We have no further observations. We have no way to access it observationally or scientifically, and that's where we stop.
You have spoken about your desire to share all information scientifically that you're involved with. Is there any part of your world that subjects itself to proprietary commercialization that results in profit to the professor and or the university?
Actually, yes. So actually, I've applied for a patent. I developed, so when I mentioned earlier about a lot of cosmology, a lot of astrophysics being engineering projects, we have a certain goal. We need a certain precision, okay? To get that certain precision, we need to build an instrument with certain characteristics to certain tolerances. We need to design algorithms that can analyze it in a sophisticated fashion in order to separate signal to noise in order to make predictions. Those kinds of algorithms and engineering developments definitely have commercialization potential. And I've developed algorithms. I submitted for a patent, actually, a software patent on an algorithm I designed a few years ago. For the most part, in astrophysics and cosmology, that's not the case. In other fields of physics, definitely. So material science, definitely people go after patents and make a lot of money on patents, both for the professor and the university and the department. Everyone gets a slice. Also in computational astrophysics, so trying to simulate hot plasmas moving around at high velocities. This looks a lot like what happens inside of, say, nuclear weapons. So very similar physical processes or fusion reactors. So a lot of the algorithms that are designed in there actually make their way over to the Department of Energy, for example, in studying how nuclear weapons will decay over time. So there's actually, you'd be surprised, this kind of fundamental research, the engineering challenges, the algorithmic and the software challenges that people face make their ways out, percolate out into industry and into community. Maybe one more question? Or no? No, he's standing right behind me. Sorry. That's it. Thank you very much.
Come and join us next week to hear Conrad Heinz about the Great Flood. This meeting is adjourned.